Welcome to another edition of Learning Leaders Live. And before I do anything else, I want to congratulate Dwayne. He passed his Certified Professional in Talent Development through ATD, and that is a tough certification to get, and very few people pass on their first time. So congratulations, Dwayne.
Thank you. I will not argue that it was a tough certification to get. I studied for weeks, maybe months, and still went into there feeling unprepared. And I'll tell you, the first question I got, I looked at and I thought to myself, I don't recognize that name at all. And I thought, certainly this is all downhill from here. But at the end, I was happy that it was a pass. And so thank you.
Do you remember the first question?
It had something to do with a gentleman whose last name was Super. And I remember looking at the name going, if I'd seen a name, Super, I would have associated with superheroes, and I would have some sort of mnemonic device to remember this person's name.
So remember that, sure. Well, I'll tell you what, I don't recognize the name Super either. So, okay.
Well, tonight,
so,
Bob, one of the first things I saw you do, I remember it was my first training magazine conference and expo. We went through the 3-day master trainer course with you and then went right into what we're going to talk about tonight, 7 greatest mistakes trainers make and how to avoid them. So this is one that I've seen you do in person probably 3 times, but I'm glad to do it with you again tonight because there's a lot of good information in here that people need to know.
Well, it's interesting because every year I thought I should change things up for the training conference, and it's just so popular that training says, no, we want you to do that one again. So, all right, so let's get started. 7 greatest mistakes trainers make and how to avoid them. And so we actually need to start by saying, what is training? And training is a process. It's not an event. It begins long before the training ever takes place, and it continues until we see results in the workplace. And then we have to ask ourselves, okay, what is the purpose of training? And the purpose of training is not butts in seats. The purpose of training is to get results. That's why all organizations do training, is they want to get better results from their people back on the job. And so I want to give you the 7 greatest mistakes and then give you strategies. So mistake number 1 is no transfer strategy. No transfer strategy. It's interesting that we do a lot of, when you look at the instructional design models, they're all about how are we going to deliver this piece of content. And the thing that they miss is how are we going to make sure that that content transfers. And so very few people, when they're doing their designs, build in a transfer strategy. So a number of years ago, colleagues of mine, John Newstrom and Mary Broad, built this matrix out. And it basically did manager, participant, trainer, before, during, and after. And they said, these are the 3 people that have the greatest impact on whether or not training ever gets used. And these are the 3 points in time. There are things that can happen before, there are things that can happen during, there are things that can happen after. And so the question really was, who has the greatest impact? And so I want you to think about that for just a second. You have the manager, the participant, the trainer, before, during, and after. So there are 9 points in time. Who do you think has the greatest impact? And I'll give you just 30 seconds to think about that and say, okay, what's my guess? Okay, so what's your guess? And I will tell you that very few people actually guess the correct answer the first time.
I know I
And
did.
that's the manager before is number one. Yep, the manager before is number one. The trainer before is number two. And the manager after is number three. Now, I want you to just think about those three. Manager before. How a manager prepares someone to go to training is critical. And yet, a lot of managers just send trainers to be able to tick the box for performance development that needs to be done on a yearly basis. Or they send them as a reward, or they send them as a punishment. But very few managers send people to develop people. And so manager before. Manager after. Does the manager allow people time to use the skills and apply the knowledge that they've gained in the class? And then the trainer during is obviously, does the trainer facilitate all of that? Maybe the manager doesn't know how to have a conversation with their participant. So does the trainer help coach the manager so that they can have a conversation before they come to training? Does the trainer help the manager with ideas on how can you help people apply these ideas after class? Because what we want to do is help both you and them to get results. So let me give you three quick strategies, one for each. And number one, manager before, have the manager meet with the participant and develop learning goals for attendance together. And number two, the trainer brief the manager on the goals of the course. A lot of managers don't even know what they're sending people to, and try this the next time you have a course. Start the course by asking, why are you here, and see what kind of responses you get from people. And then number three, make sure the manager provides time for participants to apply their knowledge and their skills. So that's mistake number one.
You know,
Now,
Bob,
mistake number
if I can
two.
chime in for just 1 second.
Yes.
I took what you
Yep.
taught us in this first class, and when I produced some training for one of our branches across the country where I work, and one of the first things I did was explain to the manager, look, you're key to this. Without you, this isn't gonna work. This is gonna be kind of a waste of everyone's time. And there's the look on their face. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
It might not be for all managers, but there aren't a lot of managers out here who don't mind a little ego stroking. And so if you can go up to them and say, look, you are very important. We need your help with
Yep.
this to make it successful. And what I did was I thought to myself, how can I make this as easy as possible for this manager to do? So I wrote him up an outline of the conversation that he should have with his direct reports going into this. I wrote everything basically for him, saying, here's what they're going to be going through. Just explain this to them. And then at the end of it, explain what your expectations are so that they know it's important to you. And I made it as simple as possible for them. And I think that had a profound impact on the success of the training.
Perfect. That's absolutely right on target. Okay, let's look at mistake number two. Too much content, too little time. And it's interesting as I ask people, what are their three greatest challenges today? That very often they say getting management support for training, too much content, too little time, and transfer. And the interesting thing is that 25 years ago, the problems were still the same. So we've been giving people solutions, but people haven't been applying the solutions. So let's look at too much content, too little time. Whenever I'm designing a program, subject matter experts can come up with more content that could ever be covered by anybody, no matter how much time you have. And also SMEs just think that, well, people should really know everything. And so what I do is I let them share, here's everything that people could know. And then I have them start dividing it up into three buckets. What's the real need to know? If there were 3, 4, 5 key things, what do they really need to know? what would be nice to know? Second to that. And then reference. What are they going to use occasionally? And perhaps they need to be able to find it, or they need to be able to watch a video on it because they do this thing like once a year. And when you do that, so if you were to look at a typical workbook that I designed for a client, a 2-day program might have 115 pages. 60 pages of that is going to be need to know. And then about 35 or 40 pages is going to be nice to know. And then the rest of it is going to be reference and resources for people. And so what we need to do is chunk our content into smaller chunks. And Wayne, do you have a comment on that? Why do we say Wayne? I apologize. I've only known you for like 7 or 8 years. I should. It's senior
I'm
moment.
used to being
Dwayne.
I'm used to being
Dwayne.
called Matt's brother. So calling me Wayne, at least that's closer to normal.
Oh wow.
But yeah, it happens. I've only lived in this town 20 years, so someday they'll get it. But I think what you're talking about is exactly right, because what you'll see is people, they'll have 2 hours worth of content and they'll just jam it into 30 to 45 minutes and think that they can get it done. And it comes from this mindset that training is actually just the transmission of information. Well, I've told them, so they should have it. And let's get as much as we can into this small time window. And once we've told them, then we've trained them.
Yep. I've told people that I've taught graduate courses at 3 universities, and never once have I been required to have anybody learn anything. My job was to deliver the content. Their job is to pass the test. If they don't pass the test, it's not my fault because I can prove that I cover the content. Well, I don't think that should be true in college, but it's certainly not true in learning and development, because if you haven't caught it, I haven't taught it. Again, let's go back. The purpose is to get results. It's not to cover content. The purpose is to get results. And unless they're equipped, unless they know what they need to know and they can do what they need to do, then we have not succeeded. Okay, so let's move to mistake number 3. Content chunks are too long. And interestingly, you just touched on that one. When I look at my clients' materials initially, most of their content chunks are what I would say are 45 to 60 minutes long. And so I always teach them to apply what I call the 90-28 parentheses 4 rule. So we know that adults can listen with understanding for 90 minutes. They can only listen with retention for 20 minutes. And face-to-face, we need to involve them every 8 minutes. And if it's virtual, it's every 4 minutes. So basically, our basic content chunk is a 20-minute chunk. And within that 20-minute chunk, we're asking ourselves, what's the content that's going to be in that 20 minutes? How am I going to get them to participate? And then how often do I need to revisit that content? So it's CPR, content, participation, revisit. And the reason that that's so critical is you can't use what you can't remember. You can't use what you can't remember. And once we go past 20 minutes, people can retain what we're saying, but they don't remember what we're saying. And the reason we want to involve people every 4 to 8 minutes is because of the influence of media. The average high school student on graduating from a U.S. high school has been in class 14,000 hours. They've been exposed to television for 18,000 hours. And American television, matter of fact, most commercial television worldwide never goes more than 8 minutes without a break for commercial. So they have years of media reinforcement that says you don't have to pay attention for more than 8 minutes. And I think it's critical. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I thought you were done. But one thing that I when I talk to people about this, it's really it can be really really intimidating. The idea that you have to break these up into 20-minute chunks and you have to have participation, and especially when you make a transfer from more of a presentation, more of a sit and get style to this facilitated style, it's intimidating because they're not used to that. They're used to I'm going to stand here and I'm going to tell you, and you're going to sit there and you're going to listen. But one thing that you have reinforced almost every time that I've seen you deliver this, and in other lessons, is that participation isn't hard. It just takes time. It takes time to actually think about it beforehand. It takes planning.
Yep, absolutely. And actually, I've shown people over and over again that you can actually deliver content faster when people are involved, because the excuse that a lot of people give is, I don't have time for people to get involved, as though involvement is going to take longer. And we've shown over and over again that you can cut the time it takes to deliver a class by a third if you involve people in the learning process. Now, we're actually going to put this in two parts because I have 7 mistakes, but I want to give you a teaser for the next mistake. And so I want to give you a hint. I would say that when I give you this teaser in the next episode, 98% of you are going to say, I do that right now. And when I tell you how to fix it, you're going to say, why didn't I think of that? Why didn't I think of that? So I want you to think about what is the mistake that 98% of all trainers make? And then we'll give you a simple fix to it. And so we're coming up pretty quickly. In 2 weeks, I'll be presenting at ATD for the 44th time. And yep, that's a long time. So I'm now on my 53rd year in this career, and blessed to be able to do it. So I want to thank you for listening in and watching, and we're excited to give you part 2 the next time.